Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. Lara Logan, how are you?
Hello, Mark.
Thanks for coming. It's an honor to meet you.
Thank you.
Great pleasure. I've admired you from afar. You're reporting all over the world, very, very dangerous places. Your last slot was with CBS, 60 Minutes, but you've been with a lot of media, important media companies. You've reported out of Afghanistan. You've reported the Middle East, including Egypt. You've reported about Benghazi. You've reported about a lot of the big issues of our time. Recently, at least for a lot of us, you did an interview with a gentleman by the name of Mike Ritlin, former Navy SEAL. You did a podcast, and you gave your opinion of the media. I want to read you something that Ted Koppel recently said, to see if you agree with it or want to add to it or subtract from it. He said the other day, I'm terribly concerned that when you talk about the New York Times these days, when you talk about the Washington Post, we're not talking about the New York Times of 50 years ago. We're not talking about the Washington Post of 50 years ago. We're talking about organizations that I believe have in fact decided as organizations that Donald Trump is bad for the United States, that we have things appearing on the front page of the New York Times right now that never would have appeared 50 years ago. Analysis and commentary on the front page. He also said this perception that the establishment press is out to get him, meaning the president, doesn't mean that great journalism does nothing. But the notion that most of us look upon Donald Trump as being an absolute fiasco, he's not mistaken in that perception. And he's not mistaken when so many of the liberal media, for example, describe themselves as belonging to the resistance. What does that mean? What does that mean? Have you experienced this too?
I have. And I have to say that I was cheering when I heard it reported on what Ted Koppel had said, because I thought, wow, finally someone else is standing up and I'm not alone anymore. Because when it's just me, I'm easy to crush, right? But when it's myself and it's Ted Koppel, and there was a former managing editor at the New York Times who came out and said the same thing. They've become the paper of record against Donald Trump. And so what you're seeing is a growing number of figures. And this restores my faith in journalism, because I know these people are there. I know I'm not a Lone Ranger. I know I'm not the only one who remembers what great independent journalism is supposed to look like. I know I'm not the only journalist who's watching in horror as opinion and pejorative language is passed off as fact, where anonymous sources are given complete cover to do political assassinations without any regard for the consequences of what they're doing, where journalists are walking hand in hand with propaganda groups and pushing forward narratives that are not based in fact, that are not based in honest journalism, that are nothing more, than political targeting, thinly disguised as journalism today. And the best part about all of this, Mark? There's one set of people who are not fooled by any of it. They lack the context very often. They lack a lot of the information to know exactly the extent of how they're being deceived and manipulated. But they know in their guts. And that's the audience, that's the viewers, that's the readers, that's all the people, the length and breadth of this country, in whether they're Democrats or Republicans, who are lining up to have this conversation right now, who know that something is not right. And that's why they're turning away from the news. And that's why they're not watching. And that's why they're frustrated. And that's why there's so little trust and faith in the media these days. And responsibility and accountability begins with us.
Why do you think this is the case? Why do you think one ideology, really one party, is so ubiquitous in newsrooms, whether it's newspapers, whether it's cable TV, whether it's network TV, whatever it is? Is it that this is taught in journalism school, or it's become more of a sort of a social circle, or they hire one another? How do you explain this?
Well, in my experience, there are several parts to this. It's no secret that the vast majority of academic institutions in this country are liberal, right? And for me, I want to be very clear here. I'm an independent thinker, okay? Nobody owns me. I'm not owned by the left, and I'm not owned by the right. Nobody owns me. I want to be very clear about that, because I've been falsely labeled as being politically motivated in any direction, and none of that is true. So what bothers me is that one political ideology dominates almost all of your academic institutions. And that same political ideology dominates all of your newsrooms, almost all of your newsrooms. I mean, let's face it, until Fox News, in television, where did you go if you weren't liberally minded or moderate, if you like? If you wanted to hear an alternative point of view or a conservative point of view, where did you go in television? You didn't go, there was nowhere to go. So Fox News, to me, is so successful because there are so many Americans saying, hey, I want a different point of view. I want to hear something else. And most people will look at a little, sample of all different kinds of media, especially
today. Is this
today.
why Fox News is under attack by CNN and MSNBC, and the New York Times does this big story, and the New Yorker magazine does a big story, and then all of a sudden their hosts are under attack and they're being boycotted and their advertisers are being boycotted because they cannot tolerate even one platform that doesn't do the dance?
Yes, because when they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, all their butts are covered, aren't they? Nobody's challenging them. Nobody's holding them to account for what they're reporting. We all go sailing along thinking we're doing such amazing, outstanding work. There was an incredible reporter who said this once, Gary Webb. If anyone's seen the movie To Kill the Messenger, he was the guy who broke the story about the CIA's involvement in crack cocaine on the streets of America and their involvement in funding rebels, right? And using drug money to do so. Well, Gary Webb won the Pulitzer, and then he was destroyed. This man killed himself by the way, shooting himself twice in the head, which is quite an achievement. And he said, I was going, to journalism colleges, and I was giving speeches, and I was getting awards, and, I was being lauded and recognized by my whole profession. And then I realized what it was really about. It wasn't because I was so great and because my work was so good. It was because I'd never written anything important enough to suppress. And that ended with Gary Webb having no career, no family. He lost everything, and then he lost his life. So when you stay inside the bubble and inside the narrative, right, that dominates the media industry, it's a safe place to be because nobody's coming after you. These propaganda groups, and one in particular, Media Matters for America, they're targeting Fox News hosts like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham morning to night. They have an army of people who are paid to do this. That's their job. Every day when they wake up, they're looking for a way to destroy these people.
But they feed the other media outlets, and they're more than happy to use the opposition research, believe it or not, on these hosts.
Well, think about it. If you have a profession that is dominated by one political ideology, when you have propagandists who are feeding that ideology, they agree with each other. So they have fertile ground for those ideas to take root. Not all journalists, just because you're liberal doesn't mean that you can't be a great journalist. Just because you vote Democrat doesn't mean you can't be a great journalist. Fortunately for all of us, there are principles of great journalism that exist outside of the politics. But what all of us have is we're human. And so we have things, we're all predisposed to believe people we agree with and like, more so than we do the people that we think, we don't agree with. And so you have fertile ground for this propaganda to take root. Then on top of that, you have a lot of laziness. You have a lot of armchair reporters who are just happy to pick up a phone and to report whatever a source tells them because it's the White House or it's the FBI or it's someone where their butts are covered, right? No one's ever going to hold them to account if they report nonsense because they've got an official source for it. But now what's happened, what's changed, because that was always there, right? What's changed today is that you now have a press corps that's working hand in hand with propaganda organizations with a political agenda. And so what Ted Koppel was saying, people are part of the resistance, that's exactly what I was talking about when I said too many journalists today are political operatives now. They've forgotten how to be journalists. They've forgotten what we're supposed to be as journalists. And they've become political operatives. And that they have a predetermined outcome for all of their reporting. They want the removal of this president. They don't think he should ever have been elected. They don't like anything about him. You know what it's called? Resisting the normalization of Donald Trump. It's a Media Matters mission statement. It's Media Matters for America. Put this out to their donors and their funders and their supporters that they will resist the normalization of Donald Trump. And that means you're not allowed to look at any policy of this administration and evaluate that policy on its merits. You're not allowed to balance your reporting. People say to me, well, this president doesn't help himself with his style. And I say, well, I'm just sure that's true. I mean, he rubs everybody up the wrong way at some point or another. Style is not his strength. But my question is, how much would his style matter if we spent 50% of the time talking about his style instead of 98% of the time? And what if we had 50% of the time actually looking at the policies of the administration and seeing what works and what doesn't? Would we care so much about his style then? Part of the mission statement for this propaganda movement is that Donald Trump will be known forever as the least popular president in America. So that is going to be that's a predetermined outcome that they want. And what disappoints me, and actually what really I find extraordinarily concerning, to use Ted Koppel's words, I'm very concerned by, is the number of journalists who've taken a political position and who still expect and demand the legitimacy of being objective and independent and being, open and balanced and fair. These are not people who are open-minded. Your minds have become closed. And until we recognize that, we're going to continue sowing the seeds of our own death and destruction. And by the way, these propaganda groups don't want an independent, robust press. They're only too happy to see us bury ourselves because they're working on controlling the different levers. They don't. If independent voices was what they wanted, if great journalists were what they wanted, if that was their problem with me, was my journalism, then they wouldn't be doing this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget. During most weeknights, you can watch me on Levin TV, Levin TV. Go to blazetv.com/Mark, blazetv.com/Mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'd love to have you.